This is
Good
Anna
morning.
Patterson
This
with
is
the
Anna
North Carolina
Patterson.
Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with saying Anna and I are back from Washington, D.C. We spent the week last week in DC attending two different conferences, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's Policy Forum and the National Community Reinvestment Coalition's Just Economy 2025 conference. And throughout the week, we were able to connect with partners, both new and old, across the country, exchange ideas, different, pieces of information. And then we also spent quite a bit of time on Thursday advocating to several members of our congressional delegation and their staff, talking to them about the importance of protecting federal resources for housing and community development, expanding the housing credit, and more. Particularly as we continue to face a lot of challenges and threats to resources and programs that serve as the foundation for our housing ecosystem. So it was a great trip. The cherry blossoms were definitely in full bloom. It seems like quite a busy time. We also we were able to attend the Action Campaign hosted their first ever congressional briefing on the housing credit. And our very own executive director of the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, Scott Farmer, was one of the panelists at that briefing. And it was really, actually really interesting and cool to see how many different members of Congress supported the housing credit, but also to see all the different ways the housing credit is used across the country. And it was really clear that this issue of expanding the housing credit is not only a priority, but it's one that has support from all sides. Moving on to federal policy and advocacy updates. This is a bit of an abbreviated call because we are catching up, but also because a lot of the big news in terms of the budget and things like that happened the week prior. But last week on Friday, the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, they did announce that they intend to rescind the 2023 Community Reinvestment Act, CRA, final rule and reinstate the previous CRA rule from 1995. We're going to continue to keep an eye on this and listen to CRA experts about what this might mean for our work and how it looks for the weeks and months to come. We also are preparing for the reintroduction of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Acts next week, the week of April 7th. So we learned this at the congressional briefing last week. This version of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act is not really anticipated to change much, except the House version will include what they are calling a sense of Congress provision. And this did exist in the Senate version last time, but this language essentially is used to encourage states and localities to reform or remove discriminatory land use policies from their QAP and from policies that interact with the housing credit. Moving on to state and local updates, we have seen well over 650 bills being filed as of today, April 1st. And actually, the filing deadline was March 20th. So we saw a flurry of bills really be introduced. And as people are trying to get vehicles in, and the crossover deadline, which is the deadline by which any sort of bill that has funding attached to it needs to pass at least one chamber, that deadline is May 8th, I believe. If you're familiar with our policy agenda, we will be releasing a summary in the coming weeks about how the bills that have been filed that we have really seen our attention drawn to, how they relate to our different priorities and some analysis and reflection on their potential impacts. 4 bills were filed actually recently last week that focus on housing supply that we want to lift up and name. There's Senate Bill 497, which is an act required to require the siting of middle housing structures in all residential zones, meant to sort of incentivize that middle housing development. Senate Bill 499, targeting developing, preserving housing near job centers. And Senate Bill 495 is a reintroduction of a bill that made it pretty far last year and that we're hoping will go all the way this year, the regulation of accessory dwelling units. And then Senate Bill 492, a single stair building code reform, which changes some of the building code language to allow for greater density in a pretty simple but impactful way. Moving to reports and resources, if you haven't already checked out the GAP report, the GAP report is a report from our national partners at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Highly recommend you taking a look at this report. Every year, we continue to see how the growing shortage of affordable homes is disproportionately bared by the lowest income renters in the United States. So we know that there's a shortage of 7.1 million affordable and available rental homes, and the cost burden ratios really show that as well. About 87% of low-income renters are cost burdened, so they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and 75% are facing severe cost burden. So that means they're spending more than 50% of their income on rent. And so as a result, we know that extremely low income renters are actually responsible for, and they are over 2/3 of all severely cost burdened households in the United States, even though they are only a quarter of all the renters in the United States. I think this report, in combination with the Out of Reach report, which highlights the gap in affordability that stagnant wages creates for renters, is really important. Are two big resources that it's part of the reason why we use them so consistently. We know it's a supply issue, but we also know there's an affordability issue, and those that have consistently been bearing the burden of this affordability and supply issue are continuing to face this and continue to face challenges. And as our federal resources are under threat, a lot of folks are at risk of losing their homes. As always, if you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have several other resources and reports that we want you to check out in our call notes. I do want to call out one resource in particular that actually would take you to a few others, but the North Carolina Housing Coalition is part of the Opportunity Starts at Home campaign, and every now and then they release updated fake fact sheets on connections between housing and different policy areas. So one of the most recently updated fact sheets includes one on housing and disability rights, as well as food access and homelessness. But they also have several other areas where they have fact sheets kind of showing the intersection between housing and criminal justice, housing and economic development, and so on and so forth. So I would definitely check that out if you are able to. I also want to thank the members of the staff from the members of the congressional delegation that we met with last week. So folks from Congresswoman Foushie's office, from Congressman Brad Knott's office, from Congresswoman Adams' office, and from Congresswoman Foushie's office as well. Thank you all so much for your time and your energy, and also for your concern about housing. We really appreciate your time and your energy last week. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you next time.